So where's the happy dance?
Happy, happy dance.
This is what it looks like when white men try to dance.
Oh, we gotta get that white boy overbite. So we're about 30 miles south of Jacksonville, and it's a very active work yard because we are working on the boat, and it is, very different from where we just were. We are out at the coast, and we are in tidal waters, and we'll show you what we're working on as we go. And we'll find out what Esther thinks of all this too.
We are on the hard going up and down a ladder, and there's a lot of noise and indicators of people working on their boats and boats being hauled out of the water, so that's different.
We are replacing our engine mounts for our Yanmar 3JH2E. It's a 3-cylinder inboard diesel. These engine mounts will help stabilize the engine. They obviously hold the engine up, but ours are currently shot or close to shot. So this should also help with engine noise and keep the rumbling to a minimum and the vibration in the hull. So to do that, I've already gone around and I've loosened the main support nuts. Not loosened, but I gave them a turn just to make sure they'll go. So we cracked whatever seal there might be there. And the mechanic here at Green Cove Springs Marina, Ricky, who's a real champion, lent us this half-ton hydraulic jack. He calls them the jaws of life. So we'll move this around in different areas of the engine and support the engine where each mount is coming out. So this is a half-ton, but really our engine weighs about 350 pounds, roughly. So at any given moment, from what I read last night and what the mechanic told us yesterday, the engine really should be able to support itself on 3 mounts. But this will all be good. It'll keep the engine flat and level. It'll help us line up the bolts when we put everything back together, because even though it can support itself on 3 mounts, I would imagine it doesn't do so stably. So this is really going to come in handy. Originally we were going to use an A-frame, which goes around the top of the boat and would have a hoist chain that we would have had to wrap around the engine. We also have a hoist point right here to lift the engine a few inches to try to do this job. But this is going to be a lot easier. So as we go along, I'm going to hand all of the bolts to Esther so she can clean them up with Lanocote, which this stuff is amazing. It'll break down any surface corrosion that's on there. So we'll be able to clean up the bolts. Smells terrible. It smells like a horse farm. Like, it's really gross. Very curious what it's made of, because it really smells like ass. But it works incredibly well to break down current corrosion, and it'll also help us protect from future corrosion. So before we put all the bolts back in everywhere on the boat, we're going to be using Lanocote. And then when we get the old mounts out, these are replacement from Yanmar, but the pattern on the mount is a little bit different. What we'll do is we'll measure the height from the base to this bolt and set this height before we put the mounts back in. And as we do this, as we go around, our alignment should stay pretty good. Since everything is in decent condition, it seems as though we shouldn't have any problems. The mechanic even said that this should be a good 1-to-1 swap. So we're excited to get this done today. It'll be a vast improvement. It'll be one less thing we will have to worry about when we head out, and we'll have a new Cutlass bearing, and everything from the drivetrain will be aligned and in great shape. So we're excited. This is going to be a good day. The first mount we're going to get, and we're prioritizing this mount because our 12-volt system is grounded on this part of the engine. So you can see our 12-volt ground comes in and hits this bolt up here. So we want to do this one first, just in case this project takes a little bit longer than we anticipate, so we could do this section in the daylight. So there's 2 bolts here which hold the mount to the engine, and then there's 2 bolts that are impossible probably to pick up on the camera, that are on the mounting plate in this engine bay here. So we'll take out these two bolts first, and then we'll remove the engine mount bolts, and then the whole mount will come out, where we'll remove this bolt here, which has already been pre-loosened by me and hand tight, so this thing doesn't move around too much as we're doing all this. So once we get that, we'll be able to, again, line up our mounts and, yeah, get everything nice and square. So this is going to be cool. All right, so here's engine mount number one. As you can see, it's pretty rusty. The rubber looks a little beat in there. You can see kind of like the dimples. I mean, this isn't necessarily that bad. The corrosion is probably the worst part, but it's also maintainable. But they're gone. We're happy to get rid of them. One thing to really note when you're doing this job, these engine mounts have a long slot for adjustment in this direction, so horizontally against the mounting surface, and then they also have just a regular bolted area. You want to be aware of which direction these are facing, because the balance on the actual mount is different. So you want to definitely be sure you know that which direction these go in, so you can mount them properly. And other than that, this is engine mount number one. We're doing good. Woo! All right, so we pulled our second engine mount. It is for the front on the port side of the boat. It is the front mount, and when we surveyed last year, I'm going to give a shout out here. If you're surveying a boat in the southeast, particularly in Florida, contact Michael Hagan. We'll put his info in here. He said that we had broken engine mounts, and he wasn't sure, like if he couldn't really see everything in the inspection, but he presumed that the mounts were at least worn. And when we had the mechanic in yesterday, he said, yeah, they're worn, but they're not the worst I've ever seen. And our engine's been really chattery, and we will definitely have a more quiet diesel from here on out, because this mount sheared clear off the pin here. So the bolt, the retaining bolt there, has sheared completely off. And that's it's pretty clearly a broken mount. So I'm really glad we're doing this now, and it's gonna really keep our boat a little bit more quiet when we're under power. So,
what other benefits are there for having good engine mounts?
There's a lot. I mean, if the engine's bouncing around too much, your whole drivetrain is at risk. So you're wearing out your Cutlass bearing faster. You're potentially, if it's just a little bit out of whack, you're also running the risk of bending your prop shaft. So yeah, I mean, bending a prop shaft is an expensive fix, and probably more expensive than doing these engine mounts, especially if you're in a place like we are right now that we could do this by ourselves. The mounts cost us $600, but if we had to hire somebody, it would have easily been double that. And if we had a different boat without this incredible access to the mounts and the engine, we would have had to haul the engine completely out. So I mean, you're talking about a multiple $1,000 job then at that point. So we've just lucked out kind of all around here.
So meaning like the access on the sides and the front, is that the key?
Yeah, the fact that we can get around pretty much the entire engine. I mean, we've got a weird squeeze point on this particular mount that we're working on, but the rest of them we could easily get a wrench in. Minus, there's a couple of like weird bends that are just a little bit off. And, if you've got an older set of Snap-on or Craftsman tools, you've probably seen this angle socket. So it helps you get into kind of some tight corners if you can't get straight on. It doesn't work at 90 degrees, but if you've got a little bit of a turn, you can get this thing to crank over, which this thing is a lifesaver. Sadly, I'm not 100% sure if, I'm not 100% sure if new Craftsman sets have this. It's really handy, but I know the old ones do. Snap-on, you could definitely get this kind of, because that's heavy duty, and that's good stuff. But if you get a cheap socket set, it's probably not going to have one of these, so you definitely want to add this to your kit, because it saved my butt today already.
On a side note, what's this scary looking t-shirt you have on.
Big business.
It's a band based out of
Seattle. They play with the Melvins now. Alright, so the way our engine bay is set up and the way the engine sits in here, there's not really a lot of room to get both of these front mounts, so getting them out was kind of a struggle, and I didn't think about this when I was doing it, when I was taking this one out, but when I was putting the other side in, I noticed that if I left out the mounting plate for the time being, getting the two bottom bolts, which are the hardest to get because the mount likes to be in the way, it's easier if I mount the bottom two bolts before putting in the backing plate, because then I can more easily, especially if I keep the top bolt unthreaded, I can more easily move the engine mount out of the way, and I actually even get some rotation where I can rotate the whole mount forward or back depending upon where I need the mount to slide to best get those bolts in. It's a really tight squeeze, and you know, our tools are only so limited, and as our mechanic Ricky said, when you're doing engine work or really any work on a sailboat, you got to learn how to get small, and that's one of the ways to get small. And the other good tip he had, which is going to make me a better human being in general, and I think we should all think of it this way, is that, you know, if you're not in the right frame of mind, this is not going to go well, because you're going to be fighting yourself more than you'll be fighting your limited space. So, you know, just keeping a clear head and being patient and just taking the time that it requires will add up to success. So I'm going to successfully install this now.
Looks like you're taking a break? What's going on here?
The fourth and final mount is in. High five.
How did the process go the way you expected, or were there some surprises?
I was actually pleasantly surprised by the fact that it only took us like 5 hours or 4 hours. Right? Because it's probably about 4 now, and we probably started around noon. About an hour per, even though the front two were a lot harder than the rear two. I think that's probably the only surprise I expected. I expected us to be finishing up in the dark, and it's still daylight.
Yay! So where's the happy dance?
Happy, happy dance.
This is what it looks like when white men try to dance.
We gotta get that white boy overbite.